There are moments when you finally have nothing to do. No messages waiting, no decisions to make, no immediate demands. And yet, you don't feel off. You feel slightly alert. Not anxious, not stressed in an obvious way, just on, as if something might be needed from you at any moment. For many people, this is one of the most confusing feelings. You're technically free, but not settled. Rest is available, but it doesn't quite arrive. This isn't because you don't know how to relax, and it isn't because you secretly enjoy being busy. It's usually because your nervous system has learned that being off isn't neutral, it's risky. At some point, many people learned that availability mattered, that responsiveness was noticed, that readiness was rewarded, that being tuned in helped things run smoothly. So the mind adapted. It stayed lightly engaged, not intensely focused, just prepared, prepared to reply, prepared to adjust, prepared to respond if needed. Over time, that state stopped feeling like effort. It started to feel normal. There's another layer to this that has less to do with busyness and more to do with identity. For many people, being on became part of who they are. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly. The person who's reachable, the person who responds quickly, the person who doesn't disappear. Over time, availability can start to feel like a form of goodness, as if being present, alert, and responsive is a moral trait. So when you're not switched on, it doesn't just feel unfamiliar, it can feel wrong. This is why rest sometimes carries guilt, even when nothing is being neglected. You're not doing anything bad, but you're not doing the thing you've learned to value. For some people, switching off feels like neglecting the world. For others, it feels like neglecting themselves, because the version of themselves they trust is the one who stays aware. There's also a time pressure hidden inside this. Modern life rarely signals when it's enough. Tasks blur into each other. Days don't really end. Messages don't close the loop. So the mind never receives a clear off cue. In the past, effort had edges. You finished work, you left a place, you closed a door. Now effort often dissolves into background awareness. You're not actively doing, but you're not done either. That in-between state is where switching off becomes hardest, because you're not responding, but you're still available. There's also a subtle fear that can surface when you finally slow down. Not fear of missing something specific, but fear of what might rise when nothing distracts you. When you're constantly engaged, there's no space for unprocessed thoughts, no room for old emotions, no quiet moments where things catch up. So staying on can become a form of containment, a way of keeping everything moving so nothing settles too deeply. This isn't avoidance in the usual sense. It's more like self-regulation through activity. And if that's been your pattern for a long time, true rest can feel strangely exposing, as if you're lowering a guard you're not sure it's safe to lower. Another reason switching off is difficult is that the mind confuses rest with irrelevance. When you're no longer needed, no longer monitoring, no longer anticipating, there can be a quiet question underneath. Do I still matter here? That question doesn't mean you need validation. It means your sense of significance has been linked to contribution, to usefulness, to responsiveness. So when those drop away, even temporarily, the system hesitates. This is why rest isn't just about comfort. It's about trust. Trust that things won't fall apart without your attention. Trust that you're allowed to exist without constantly adding value. For many people, that trust has never really been tested, so the system stays awake. Switching off, then, isn't a switch at all. It's a gradual relearning, a quiet recalibration of what safety feels like when nothing is required. And that recalibration doesn't come from trying harder to relax. It comes from small, repeated moments where nothing goes wrong when you let yourself be unavailable, not unreachable, just not responsible for everything. If you find it hard to fully switch off, It doesn't mean you're failing at rest. It often means you've spent a long time being reliable, being available, being someone others could count on. That's not something to criticize. It's something to understand. You don't need to force yourself into stillness. Sometimes the most helpful thing is simply noticing how alert your mind remains even when nothing is required. That noticing alone can soften things. Because rest isn't something you command. It's something that emerges when the system realizes it doesn't have to stay on guard. And if that hasn't happened yet, it doesn't mean it won't. It just means your mind learned its patterns very well. And patterns can change, quietly, over time, when nothing is asking anything of you.